Mic test. Okay, good. Pleasant good morning to everyone. My name is Andrew Abraham. I'm the Dean of the Division of Technical, Vocational Education and Management Studies here at CFBC. A warm welcome to you all. We have with us, of course, members of the Nova Scotia Community College. I would like to first acknowledge Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, Deputy Prime Minister and also Minister of Education et al. Miss Sherry Truss, St. Kitts and Nevis High Commissioner to Canada, welcome. And also Dr. Moya Rotam, Acting President of the CFBC, Mr. Zoran Kondali, also a manager of NSC International, students and faculty of Nova Scotia Community College. We have our registrar, Ms. Yasmin Davis, with us. We also have a vice president, acting vice president of finance, Mrs. Berridge James, our director of library resources, Mrs. Danielle, Dr. Christine Walwyn, senior lecturer, Ms. Clytie Gilbert, our students, and of course, our staff. A pleasant good morning to you all, and welcome. And of course, our presenter today, Dr. Cameron Gill. Welcome, Dr. Gill. Okay. And we, of course, have a very short, I would say, schedule here this morning. I would like to call on our past student, Mr. Shamar Pemberton, IT student here, and he's going to render the national anthem. I ask you all to stand, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Pemberton. I would just like to call Ms. Stevenson, our OADM student. Word of prayer.
A pleasant good morning to everyone. Today we will offer up the college prayer. Let us pray. O Lord God Almighty, you have given us the power of intellect and the glory and the anguish of the choice of freedom. Give us the ability always to think and choose aright, to wisely determine our destiny and shape the lives of others. Give us the courage to use the skills and intellect for improvement of your world. Deliver us from self-deception and delusion, from timidity and the flight from responsibility. Help us to reject the shallow, the artificial, and trivial. May our efforts assist us in rediscovering those values which enrich our lives, promote our designs, and purify our minds. Grant that we may serve you with zeal, be courteous to our equals, just to those we serve, sympathetic to those in distress, and a friend to those in need. For Christ's sake, amen.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. You may be seated. Welcome once again to one and all, and it is certainly a pleasure for me to be part of this second edition of the CLEPS program in partnership with, of course, in partnership with NSCC, CFBC 2023. This is the newest of a list of initiatives between the Nova Scotia Community College and CFBC. Of course, the partnership between CFBC and NSC started 10 years ago, 2013 to be exact. And we had various initiatives that saw benefit, I would say mutual benefit between both institutions, where we had members of faculty traveling to Canada to access training in assessment and evaluation of adult learners. We also had persons accessing training in assessing and actually instruction, of adult learners. We also saw the collaboration between NSCC, CFBC, and Dalhousie University as part of the CARICOM Education for Employment project to develop an agribusiness program using the CBET model at level 3. The CARICOM Emerging Leaders Program, we saw quite a number of students from CFBC accessing that program and benefiting from a one-year exchange at the Nova Scotia Community College over the years. And the numbers are growing. We are close to 20 now in terms of students who would have accessed that program. We know this year we will not have anybody going to Canada, but we hope that in the next academic year, we would have an increase in the number of persons accessing the Green Economy Scholarship that is provided, again, through the Government of Canada. Again, CFBC and the partnership between NSCC do not just stop at student exchange, but we had quite a number of faculty, like I said, who access program or training from experts from NSCC here on island in St. Kitts in prior learning and recognition, and also in leadership type training as part of the partnership with NSCC and Dalhousie University. Now, the CLEPS program, it provides, which is the latest of the number of initiatives between CFBC and Dalhousie University, provides for students, Afrocentric students in Nova Scotia, to travel to St. Kitts for a 2-week period where they would be involved in joint research activities, learning about our local culture, learning about the African slave trade and our heritage here in St. Kitts and Nevis, engaging with our students, our faculty as part of their own professional development, building relationships with our own students, and learning more about our country and our society at large. We've been privileged in the last academic year to have a total of 6 students from the early childhood program at NSCC here, and also 1 environmental science student who had the opportunity to engage and to interface with our local ministries, Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, and also the early childhood unit, where these students had the opportunity to visit daycare centers around the island, not only in St. Kitts, but also in Nevis. And they were given the opportunity as well to tour our sister island of Nevis the same way they did here in St. Kitts, to learn about our history, our culture, again, a rich history of St. Kitts and Nevis. So this year is no different, although the numbers are a bit smaller. We believe it is important for this partnership to continue to thrive and to grow, so that we ourselves here in St. Kitts and at CFBC can one day in the not too distant future be able to benefit from a similar type arrangement for our students to travel to Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia to be exact, to be part of the rich culture of Nova Scotia and to participate in an institution which I would say is very diverse, they're robust, they are similar in terms of our program offerings. There's a lot we can learn from them. It's that little international office which I would like to give credit to, the giant of an international office who have reached across the world and the impact that they are creating. We are very happy, we are proud to call you a partner and look forward to the evolution of this partnership and how CFBC and NSCC can continue to grow from strength to strength. Once again, welcome, and we look forward to the next 2 weeks. We have a student in business, which we would see engagement with our business students, our business faculty, our local business people, and to see how we do things here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and where we can both learn from each other's experiences and to enrich, further enrich, that is, the experience of you being on island. And I would just take this opportunity to say to you to enjoy every minute of St. Kitts and Nevis and every learning opportunity that presents itself. We ask you to take as much as possible back with us from this lovely Twin Island Federation. Welcome, and I thank you. I would now take this opportunity to invite our acting president, Dr. Moya Rotham, to bring you some remarks. Dr. Rotham.
Good morning. Kindly allow me to adopt the protocols that Dean Abraham has so ably established. It is a good thing to see you, Zorana. It is a good thing to have NSCC with us this morning. The CFBC welcomes the Nova Scotia Community College, NSCC, to implement its second Culture, Entrepreneurship, Leadership, and Professional Skills program, which promotes Afrocentrism and which aims to use international learning experiences to develop and refine numerous competencies, enhance leadership and accountability capabilities, broaden cross-cultural collaborations, and to intentionally enrich opportunities for cultural esteem building. It is not a program that has been created by chance, but one that has been created with great intentionality. And it is our hope that you will all benefit from the experience here. I recall last year I was sharing with Ambassador Truss, a student who broke down because of the experiences already explored before coming to this sermon. She wouldn't have been here for 24 hours, but just to be in an environment where she felt as if she could be herself, that for me made me realize how much we take for granted. And whether it is just in our daily living or regular interactions, those which define us in terms of our personality, in terms of our ethnicity, or social standing, or profession, etc., take nothing for granted. We welcome you to St. Kitts Nevis from Nova Scotia, which is one of the best whale watching places in the world, and hope that you may perhaps see a humpback whale or two on our horizons. Sometimes you see them. We welcome you understanding the disparity in our sizes when compared to the places around us, for St. Kitts Nevis is the smallest country in the Americas. in both land area and population. And we can identify with Nova Scotia in being the second smallest province in Canada in terms of total area. Yes. We in St. Kitts and Nevis had the indigenous Kalinagos living here before the arrival of the first recorded European, Christopher Columbus. Dr. Gill, I hope my verbiage is accurate. And that's why I said the first recorded European, Christopher Columbus, who arrived in the Eastern Caribbean on his second voyage of exploration and colonization in 1493, the same way the native Mi'kmaq lived and fished in Nova Scotia in your rich waters for at least 5,000 years before John Cabot became the first documented European to sail along Nova Scotia's coast in 1497. I thank all CFBC personnel for the work that has been put into the execution of this program under the leadership of Dean Andrew Abraham and the guidance of Dr. Christine Walwyn. Your efforts are always appreciated, and we ourselves try to forge our way towards institutional advancement. I wish you, as students and administrators, that your experiences may be enriched, that they'll be enriched beyond measure as you appreciate even the very efforts of your institution to create and to make this program possible. I acknowledge that sacrifices are sometimes difficult, and I would like that you yourselves affirm this and understand the importance of programs like these. We sincerely hope that we can fill the deficits that we identified in the executions of last year, and hope that as we strive to serve you better, that you yourselves will return home and you will indeed be able to serve your community and your country better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rotem. And as we move on with the agenda, I would like to call no other than Mr. Zoran Kondali. And before Mr. Kondali comes to the podium, I would just like to mention that NSCC, the giant of an international institution, have won that global award for best small institution and their initiatives around the world. That is a community college in Nova Scotia, Canada. Congratulations, Zoran, and it is initiatives like this that all added to the fulfilling and meeting the criteria for such an award. Again, and we are happy to partner with NSCC, and again, for such an achievement, congratulations. So I now call on Mr. Kondali to bring some brief remarks.
I'll tell people the mic needs to come down. Obviously. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean Abraham. Thank you to everyone for the very, very warm welcome. It's very nice and so appreciative to be back to beautiful St. Kitts and Nevis, to continue our valuable collaboration with Clarence, Fitzroy, Bryant College. This is a very much valued partnership for Nova Scotia Community College. I should probably introduce also myself to those a few who don't know who I am. I'm Zoran Kondali. I'm the manager of the small but mighty international office, hence the award for global engagement that was just awarded to us a week ago during the Conference of Colleges and Institutes of Canada. So we won the gold award among all the colleges in Canada. So that was my bragging moment a little bit. Yeah. But as Dean Andrew mentioned, that award and the work in general that we do is really the result of all the partnerships, of all the champions, our faculty, our employees, our students who express interest and are actively engaged in these initiatives, in various projects and so on. So thank you very much. And on that note, I would invite my colleagues and our student to come forward and introduce themselves, please. They thought I'll do it on my own. It's not happening. But before I do that, I would also like to give a big thank you to High Commissioner Tross for her tireless work to continue to link Canada or strengthen the link between Canada and St. Kitts and Nevis, and all her support to this fantastic program. And hopefully, yes, next year, more students. Thank you so much, High Commissioner. Oh, please, Tia, Aisha, Kia. Oh my goodness.
Okay, I was not forewarned.
Yeah, yes, you were. Just your brief introduction, please.
Okay, so Aisha Leon with NSCC. I'm a curriculum consultant and currently working as well with NSCC International. And yes, I'm very, very excited to be here. I met Commissioner Tross before, and we really appreciate your involvement and your enthusiasm. It's contagious. So thank you, and we appreciate all the effort that has gone into welcoming us here. And this is Kia, our student.
Hi, I'm Kia Augustine. I'm an Indigenous student, currently taking business administration. I already want to come back. It's only my first day. So thank you for having me.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Tia Sawyer, originally from the Bahamas, but I feel like I'm home in St. Kitts. So thank you so much. I am the manager of student services at the Ivany campus, one of our campuses in Nova Scotia, and this has been a privilege just to be able to partake in NSCC International trip here. It's always wonderful to see High Commissioner Tross, and I'm honored to be here with the minister, as well as thank you so much, Dr. Whalen, for always being there, always taking care of us, and Dr. Dane Abraham. So thank you so much. We are going to take advantage of everything that you said, Dr. Rotham. We will enjoy the food, we will enjoy the weather, and we will enjoy the people. So thank you.
And of course, a very, very big thank you to the organizers, CFBC organizers of this program led by Dean Abraham. I know from personal experience how much time, effort, and frustration sometimes it takes really to organize a program like this. I've been doing it for years at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And so a big thank you, and we hope to continue also on a reciprocal basis, as Dean Abraham mentioned. Hopefully they'll get to welcome CFBC students in a similar program in Nova Scotia as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. We will just move on with the program. I know there was another item where we had some entertainment from one of our members of faculty. That would probably just be moved down the agenda just one. And I would like to call, of course, our High Commissioner to Canada, Ms. Sherry Tross, to bring some brief remarks. Ms. Tross.
Thank you very much, Dean Abram. I'm a little short. Of course, let me start by recognizing the Honorable Jeffrey Hanley, our Minister of Education, who's doing a fantastic job on this file. Of course, the President of CFBC, whose name I will probably, let's see if I get it right, Moya Rotham, who I just met this morning for the first time, but I feel as if I know you already, and I think that we're going to have a wonderful opportunity to work together going forward in many different capacities. The distinguished faculty, staff, and students of CFBC, and of course, our welcome guests. Now, I feel as if they are my family because I see them all the time, whether in person in Nova Scotia or else virtually when we have meetings. And I said this because I'm really excited that I'm here for the second iteration of this program. And I'll tell you why, because I have a sense of ownership of this program. And Soren will tell you that, Tien and Aisha probably will as well. Because when I arrived in Canada in 2018, one always thinks and one always knows that one's own experience very much influences the way that you approach your positions and your appointments. I'm a former educator, and I'm also somebody who's worked in the area of international development for over 30 years. And during that time, what I have discovered is that education, training, capacity building are completely essential for development, for sustainable development. And for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, particularly now as we're talking about a sustainable island state, that's even more important. But when I arrived in 2018, I said, you know what? I am going out and aggressively meeting with the universities, colleges, academic institutions, and seeing what kinds of partnerships we can have with those institutions and with St. Kitts and Nevis to benefit us, but also to benefit them. Because St. Kitts and Nevis does not do the begging thing. We believe in partnership, we believe in reciprocity. Not because we're small, it doesn't mean we don't have something to offer. And the fact that we're on the second iteration of this culture, entrepreneurship, leadership, and professional skills program tells you that in Nova Scotia, they saw that in this wonderful federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, we had some things that we could offer, that we could share, that we could teach, that we could impart, that we could bring to their students, to their administrators, to their faculty, that could be transformational. And thank you. And so with those of you here this time around, and I know we're looking at different aspects of the program, I hope that we continue to build this to make it sustainable, and we find different ways in which students, faculty at Nova Scotia Community College, students, faculty here at CFBC, and at the Sixth Form College in Nevis, that we can all work together to get the kinds of outcomes where we have young people who are ready to face the world. They have the cultural consciousness. They have the leadership ability. They have the educational founding that they can go forward and make sustainable, well-governed, well-thought-out policies, business, security, in any way that you want to be. St. Kitts and Nevis, I know when you go back, just as for those last year, when you go forward in your own professions, you will be reflecting. I have received so many emails, I will tell you this, Minister, from the students who participated here last year. It was transformational for them. The President mentioned that, and it's not an exaggeration. They saw the world and they saw themselves in a different way, just from being here. And that's an important message for them, but it's an important message for us as well, to recognize just how much we bring to the table on any given day. And of this, we should be proud. At the same time, we should be humble and recognize that the things that we take for granted shouldn't be taken for granted. We are privileged and we are blessed. So thank you, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful program and that it's even better this year and next year even bigger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner Truss. Moving on with the agenda for this morning's welcome ceremony, I would just like to share as well in terms of feedback that we've received from Cohort 1. I can tell you that I maintain contact with most of them, and the intensity in terms of the pursuits to get back to St. Kitts, it makes me shiver sometimes, because They reach out and they're interested in what you guys are doing. They want to know if you guys got here safely. And, oh, remember when you go to Nevis to do this? And remember when we go to the northern part of the island? And they are giving me reminders so that you guys have the kind of experience that they had last year. So, again, the feedback was very positive, and we are really looking forward to the future of this program. I would like to call our very own Mr. Inoite Enanga, who would give us a rendition here as part of the entertainment for this morning's ceremony. Mr. Inanga?
Thank you. I like taking risks, and when Dean Abraham asked me to perform a number here, I said, okay, I'm going to do something again that I've never done before, just to challenge myself. This is a Lord Kitchener song that was performed by the amazing Etienne Charles. I love Etienne Charles. He came and performed at Music Fest in 2013, and I kid you not, I went to him afterwards and I said, I need some lessons. And we went, I met him at his hotel, and we played together he's from Trinidad. I think he went to school in Juilliard, and he's just tearing it up all over the world, taking traditional forms of calypso and turning them into jazz. And so this is my shameless attempt at matching his virtuosity. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
I wish that rhythm could still be boom, 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 boom. That's like every Sunday morning. When you think about Lord Kitchener and his time as a calypsonian, one of the great calypsonians of Trinidad and Tobago, it's part of Caribbean history, thinking about the West Indies cricket team. When they first beat England in 1950, Lord Kitchener wrote that song, Cricket, Lovely Cricket. So it's the pride and joy of the region. And here in St. Kitts and Nevis, where cricket is played and calypso is being sung in all of the different formats, and it's just the culture of the people. And I reflect on the steel pan, which is to my left. It's one of the last, if not the most recent, musical instrument that was developed. And it was done right here in the region in the 1930s. And it was developed again from people who were enslaved, who were brought to the region in the 1700s. And that's their way back then of getting the creativity, the ingenuity skills that they use for their own entertainment. Calypso, steel pan, and cricket. It as part of our culture. So for visitors who are just getting a taste of Caribbean history, it is live and direct here this morning in terms of the steel pan, calypso, and of course, Lord Kitchener. So I would now call on our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, Dr. Hanley, to just give you some brief welcoming remarks.
A very pleasant good morning, and I apologize if I don't have a voice this morning. Haven't had to use it extensively during the holiday yesterday. But I want to recognize, of course, Our Excellency, my good friend, Ambassador Sherry Truss, our acting Vice President, Dr. Rotham, of course, our featured speaker, Dr. Gill, and of course all of the faculty and staff at CFBC. And last but by no means least, I welcome the delegation from the Nova Scotia Community College to St. Kitts. As I sat there, I reflected for a while, wow, I am missing college life. Some 20 years ago, I graduated from university, and as I listened to Dean Abraham giving the overview of the program, followed by the president, sharing all of the benefits of the program thus far, I said to myself, wow, this is something powerful. And it is something that you can be rest assured that will continue to be supported not only by CFBC, but by the government as an extension as this program continues to strengthen the relationship between Canada, as Her Excellency would have indicated, and St. Kitts. There are always some uniqueness about every program that we introduce. And I am extremely proud to know that those who would have participated thus far, they still have St. Kitts high on the radar, and I believe that this cohort would be no different. To you, the students, and I asked him if he was doctor. He said, no, I didn't reach that far. Zoran Kondali, I want to welcome you again to St. Kitts, and do hope that your time here will be one of great expectations, and at the same time, the objectives that you would have set for yourselves, you will be able to achieve them. The love is natural, so that will be just like that. And I see the smiles, so I know you have felt the love already. The sunshine, of course, I know you're welcoming it, but we are a little bit complaining because I am telling you, it is extremely hot, but we give God thanks still because it is still needed. So I really want to thank Her Excellency Sherry Truss for the work that she continues to do in Canada, particularly ensuring that the best flag in the Caribbean, as was adjudged, continues to fly in the region, and millions of people are getting to know about this small island, just like you. So don't feel too badly, sir. That's a uniqueness right there. Is exposed to our greatness here. So, Ambassador, I want to thank you. And I know as we dialogue before you leave, there's some more assignment that I have for you. But I want to thank the Nova Scotia Community College again for this 10 years, I think, of a relationship that can only grow into a beautiful garden that everyone would be able to benefit and pick a flower and share it with others. I do hope, as was mentioned, that perhaps next year we will be able to send a set of our students over to Canada to gain that experience as well. So once again, thank you very much, and we look forward to even closer relationships with this college as we try to make sure we push it right to the top in our academics and other areas that we are pursuing. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Of your ministry and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. It's very much appreciated. And just a small token of appreciation on behalf of our college.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think she wants it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is to welcome our colleague and featured speaker this morning, our resident historian, Dr. Cameron Gill. And I hope that you enjoy Dr. Gill's presentation as much as I know I will, even before presenting. I'll just give you a brief, share my experience that I had last week. Dr. Gill did a presentation here, and even before he finished speaking, I sent him a message and I said, I just want to continue listening to you for the rest of the night because the information that was shared, the historical background, the research, and as a research student myself, it is the connection to your topic and the way you've applied yourself to study the history not only of St. Kitts and Nevis, and again, let me be more specific, Brimstone Hill and Sandy Point and the fortresses that was constructed on that part of the island, the history of the French and the English for this small island nation, even back in the 1700s, just the information that you're able to share, impart with us. I can tell you that I am looking forward to this morning, sir. I don't mean to put any pressure on you, but I know that's your vocation, so I'm expecting this. So I would take up no more oxygen in the room, but welcome Dr. Gill. Dr. Gill.
Good morning, all. Okay. Thank you, Dean Abraham, for this opportunity. I like how, in a sly way, after you said all of that, then you said, not to put any pressure on you. So, thanks, but no thanks. But in all seriousness, allow me to adopt the protocol that has been established. Now, when Dean Abraham messaged me last week, Monday, after we had our annual authors forum, in which several of us launched our new books, he told me he wanted to speak on my research as well as speak about the Atlantic slave trade. So my presentation will be in two parts, but I shall try to be as brief as possible, okay? So in the first part, I'll speak about my specific research, and the second part of my presentation, I'll speak wide about the slave trade, but I want to make it specific to Canada's involvement in the Atlantic slave trade, because many people do not realize that Canada played a major role in the Atlantic slave trade. So I want to dispel a stereotype, a misconception with respect to Canada being completely guilt-free when it comes to slavery. Okay, with regard to my research, now, the stereotype of the Caribbean is of the plantations, but what we need to remember was that our port towns were important facilitators for our plantations, okay? The products that were exported, that the former colonial powers, England, France, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, etc., got wealthy off of, those products could not leave this island if it were not for the ports. And then the products that came in, the products and the people, the enslaved people that came in to produce that wealth, came in through those same ports. Now, while we are, as was noted earlier, right now, the smallest nation in the Western Hemisphere, on this tiny island, you had the first English capital in the West Indies, Old Road, the first French capital in the West Indies, where we're standing right now, Bastille, and the first major English port, Sandy Point. So you have three early, very important towns on one island. Now, I'm from Bastille, and I'm proud to say that I'm born and bred in Bastille. But the reason why I chose to research Sandy Point is because my job at the time was managing the fortress, the World Heritage Site that was built to defend that port town. And in researching it, I realized that there was a lot of reference being made to the fortress was built to defend the town of Sandy Point. But then digging deeper, something did not add up. Because when I did the research, I realized that there was an equal volume of trade coming through Bastille and several other port towns in the Caribbean, Portsmouth in Dominica, Bridgetown and Spitestown in Jamaica, Kingston in Barbados, Kingston in Jamaica, etc. So the volume of the trade alone could not explain why is it that outside of the Spanish-speaking Greater Antilles, you have the largest fortress in the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, out of the polygonal forts in the Western Hemisphere, the only ones of similar size in the rest of the Americas is the one built by Christophe in Haiti and Fort Ticonderoga, which I think is in New York State in North America. So there had to be more to it. So in my research, what I found was that the boundary for this early port town ran, the boundary for English and French St. Kitts, the northern boundary ran through this port town. The English and the French decided to share the island between themselves after they arrived here between 1624, 1625. English in the middle in St. Christopher, and the French at the south and the north in St. Christophe. Southern St. Christophe was known as Bastille, and the capital took the same name, Bastille, which means lowland or valley, and then the northern part, Capesterre, headland. The boundary between Capesterre and St. Christopher ran actually through Sandy Point in the northern part of Pump Bay. So this made out of the 4 towns, Sandy Point, Old Road, Bastille, Keon, we were the only frontier town. As a matter of fact, in the entire Caribbean, we were the only town that had a frontier between 2 nations going through it. Not even on St. Martin or on Hispaniola would you find a town having a boundary between 2 nations running through it. St. Kitts was the prototype for the rest of the English and French West Indies. The settlements in Nevis, Montserrat, Antigua, Barbuda, and the English and French Windward Islands, the settlers for those settlements started here. If St. Kitts failed for either the English or the French, their ambitions for the rest of the Caribbean would have failed as well. So last week, Monday, when I spoke, I made the analogy, the United States, China, etc., are planning to explore Mars. But they look aiming at the moon first. That's a somewhat less challenging target. The rationale being, if we don't fail on the moon, then we're not going to succeed at Mars. So for England and France in the 17th century, if we fail on St. Kitts, we're not going to succeed in our ambitions of challenging Spanish hegemony and becoming powerful and wealthy in this region. So for the English and the French, there's a lot at stake. St. Kitts had to succeed. You had 2 rivals who were always at war with each other. The only time they came together was when they collaborated to plot to try and commit genocide against the indigenous population on the island. And we have someone, a First Nations person among the students here, and so you can personally, and forgive me for bringing up anything painful out of your history. The English and the French, the only time they had any major cooperation was to plot to commit the first act of genocide by the English and the French in the Caribbean. But besides that, they were always at war. And with a boundary running through Sandy Point, so Sandy Point was the 17th century equivalent of what Berlin would have been during the Cold War and what North and South Korea are now. So with a boundary running between Sandy Point, this was a flashpoint for the 2 rising powers at the time, trying to challenge the then superpower Spain. So in digging further, I realized that was one factor that led to these fortifications being built around Sandy Point. You had English Charles Fort at the southern end of the anchorage, and then there was a French fort at the northern end in a village now known as Fig Tree, and that fort later became known as Fort Charles. Then there was a fort built in the middle that is now submerged, that is known as either Sandy Point Fort or Fort Hamilton. And then you had Brimstone Hill, which was built as an adjunct to Charles Fort. But then later on, as technology developed, and you no longer needed to place artillery right on the coast to hit ships out at sea, Brimstone Hill ended up superseding Charles Fort because it was less vulnerable position. So by the 1800s, you ended up having this tiny town on this very tiny island having fortifications as developed and advanced as those you find in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, Havana, Old Havana, etc. Okay? So, and the largest fortifications outside of the Greater Antilles. As a matter of fact, even in the UK, the only fortification of similar size is Fort Amherst in Chatham. And then there were other factors that contributed to the strategic importance of this port town. The most important sugar colonies in the Caribbean were, in order, Jamaica first, Barbados, St. Kitts, and Antigua. Okay? And sugar was, from the 18th to the 19th century, what oil was in the 20th century. So we were the Middle East of the 18th to the 19th century. All of the major powers were fighting and competing over this region. Now, unlike the 3 other important sugar colonies, Jamaica, Barbados, and Antigua, which were English colonies, they were somewhat more protected from attack by the Spanish and the French. Jamaica, because of its location, is surrounded by Spanish islands. Okay? Remember, Jamaica was actually itself once Spanish. The English invaded and took it from the Spanish. And Jamaica is surrounded by Spanish territories, Santo Domingo, Cuba, Puerto Rico. Therefore, the British placed the headquarters of their Royal Navy at Port Royal in Jamaica. So Jamaica was protected by having the headquarters of the then largest navy in the world there. Okay? Antigua had similar protection because the second largest naval base built by the British in the Caribbean was built at Nelson's Dockyard in Antigua. Okay? So the Antigua was also protected by having a large naval presence because unlike St. Kitts, where our harbors are open, what you call open roadsteads, Basti, which you can see through the window, Old Road and Sandy Point. Antigua had a natural enclosed harbor. Okay? So that was perfect for building a naval facility. Barbados was protected because its geographic location, the furthest out in the Atlantic in the archipelago, and that made it difficult to attack by sailing ships that would have to go against the prevailing wind to attack Barbados. So Antigua and Jamaica were protected by a large British naval presence, Barbados by geography. St. Kitts had none of those factors protecting it, okay? Neither a large naval base. Geographically, we were not ideal for being a large naval base. We don't have close protected harbors. And geographically, we are close to the French territories of Guadeloupe and Martinique, where the French had their major naval bases. So we were vulnerable to attack. So that is why you had these fortifications being developed on St. Kitts that were the most advanced at the time. As a matter of fact, Brimstone Hill became a prototype we call polygonal fortifications. Before that, all forts were of the bastion type, okay? Simple bastions with cannons. But Brimstone Hill pioneered this approach where you have several, in the 20th century, a term was developed called defense in depth. You see, it uses modern-day warships. So modern-day American and Chinese warships have long-range missiles to hit an enemy aircraft far away. But if that aircraft manages to evade the long-range defense, then they have close-in weapon systems, okay? So Brimstone Hill pioneered that defense in depth, where you have the cannon to hit targets further away. But if an enemy manages to land on the coast then you have the ports, these holes in the wall for sniping at an enemy at close range, okay? And they were placed on different levels. This predated the oldest such forts in the UK itself, Fort Elson and Goma, which were built at Portsmouth, the British naval base. Portsmouth is the equivalent of what Halifax is in Canada right now, headquarters of the Royal Canadian Navy's Atlantic Fleet. The earliest polygonal forts built at Portsmouth were in the 19th century, late 19th century. At that time, the British were still seeing the French rather than the Germans as the major threat to them, a mistake that they would soon realize. But about a century before, this type of fortification was built here on St. Kitts. So for various strategic reasons, Sandy Point became very strategically important. But then even after the West Indies began eclipsing in importance to the colonial powers, by the 19th century, sugar was on a decline. India was now the rising star in the British Empire. The coronation of His Majesty King Charles III is to take place, I think this weekend coming, this Saturday coming, I think. And there's controversy because in the crown jewels that were looted, I'm going to be blunt, I'm not going to be politically correct about it, looted from India, South Africa, elsewhere. But by the 19th century, India had become the star in the British Empire. We were now seen as an expense as opposed to the wealth maker for the British. So they withdraw their military presence from the islands by the late 19th century. But even after that military presence had been withdrawn, these port towns remained important to the people of the island, okay? For trading, both legal trade as well as smuggling, okay? These port towns facilitated a lot of smuggling. Today, St. Kitts is proud of our position as a high-income developing country. But there was a time when we were one of the poorest in the region. And many people survived by obtaining goods that were smuggled into the island, household products, foodstuff, etc. My mother's family are from the large Atlas, Cairn area of this island. And my mother would speak about her grandmother, who raised my mother, because my grandmother, which was her mother, like many Kititians, migrated overseas to seek better opportunities, first to Curacao and then to Puerto Rico. And my mother would speak about her grandmother, my great-grandmother, leaving Lord Village to go to Date Bay to meet the boat after smuggling items, etc., that they would need. My mother shared this story with me. One time her grandmother coming from Date Bay very late at night along one of those lonely country roads that was reputed to be haunted. So she is driving the buggy, the horse cart, and coming back home to her grandchildren. And in the distance, she's seeing this light approaching, bouncing, approaching. And back then you had the superstitions about jack-o'-lanterns, etc. I should say for the Canadians, in your tradition, a jack-o'-lantern is the friend-looking pumpkin that you use at Halloween. But in our tradition, a jack-o'-lantern has a completely different, much more malevolent meaning. So my great-grandmother coming from Date Bay with her smuggled items, foodstuff, etc. for her family, and seeing this light bouncing, approaching, okay? But when she got closer, she realized that he was a gentleman on a bicycle, and just like her, not crazy about being in this dark, supposedly haunted road at night, so he's pedaling furiously to get home. So, and when he got closer, and apparently he too saw the light on her horse carriage and was similarly apprehensive. So, forgive the raw Kititian dialect, but when he got closer, and he realized it was a woman driving the horse carriage, according to the story from my mother, he said, "Me ass, some woman really got hurt," and continued on his journey. Okay, so, but this is an example of how these ports facilitated smuggling that people needed to survive. When I was doing my research for my doctorate, I interviewed a couple of people who were former smugglers, and they spoke about bringing in brandy from St. Bart's, as well as more vital supplies. So a lot of the village shops, every shop has a village. This shop is first what the pub is in European culture. Many of the shops got their items from smugglers, okay? One smuggler shared what they would do. And he was very bold. One of our circuit courts meets in Sandy Point. And he would actually choose when they was having court hearing in Sandy Point to land smuggling items in broad daylight. And his rationale was, all of the police are going to be at the court hearing in Sandy Point, so they have no time to patrol the beach. Okay. So, but these ports facilitated now, it's not that our ancestors want to break the law. But people were poor, you had to survive, you often could not afford the groceries being sold in J.W. Thurston. That's one of the ancestors of our President TDC, etc. You cannot afford to buy the groceries, okay? So you had to smuggle to make a living, and the port facilitated that. Many people made a living as boat builders, as schooner captains, etc. Trade and passengers throughout It's ironic that in an age of aviation, when technology should have made travel in the region easier, it has gotten more expensive and more frustrating. But in those times, you could jump on a schooner and sail from island to island. So our port towns played a major role in facilitating trade, travel, and connections. There are many people today in St. Kitts and Nevis who have a parent or a grandparent from Nevis, Montserrat, etc. For example, when my father was transferred to Nevis, who was a police officer, the lady who babysat us was originally from Montserrat, a lady from a village named Belle Martin. She came to Nevis as a vendor on a schooner to sell provisions at the public market in Charlestown. And she met a guy, they liked each other, she never went back. And that is a common occurrence, okay? So our port town facilitated movement of people, trade, travel. So we were practicing regional integration even before some of our politicians coined that term. So in my research on the port of Sandy Point, I'm trying to highlight the role our ports played in our lives, in shaping our societies today, okay? For example, we had a holiday weekend, we had a lot of fetes all over. One of the schooner captains I interviewed in Scotia told me that it was common when there was a dance in Sandy Point. He would bring guys on his boat, they'll attend a dance in Sandy Point and then leave the next morning on the schooner. So people come from Scotia to Sandy Point, go to a dance, and then go back the next morning on a schooner. Today, if you want to do that, you have to fork out money for an airplane ticket, okay? So our ports played a major role. One of my former students at the Catholic school I taught at some years ago, Shama, he did a very good steel pan rendition earlier. It was a migrant from St. Kitts who left here through Sandy Point, a gentleman by the name of Woodley, who brought steel pan to St. Eustatius. So it was a Woodley from Sandy Point who introduced the steel pan and taught people on the Anastasia how to play that instrument. So our port facilitated movement of people, trade, culture, etc. Now, I can talk about my research all day, but I did promise I'm going to be brief. So I'm going to move on to the second part of what I'm going to discuss. So Dean Abraham asked me to speak about the slave trade. But I want to make specific to my audience to speak about Canada's role in that. First, allow me to dispel two common myths regarding Canada. One is that Canada did not have any slavery. And two, even though many who acknowledge that they did have it, is that enslaved people in Canada were treated more humanely than in what is now United States or in the Caribbean. First of all, with the first one, as you could guess, I'm going to say it's not true. Okay? You did have enslaved people in Canada. Some plantations, including some who were owned by merchants, including the maritime provinces, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, etc. The second one, that enslaved people were treated more humanely than in south of the border or in the Caribbean or in Latin America, that is not true. Bear in mind that in Canada, what was then known as British North America, you would have had British slave laws applied just like here in the Caribbean, okay? The treatment of an enslaved African basically would have depended on who owned them, okay? There were few humane, and humane I'm putting it in a contextual term, because at the end of the day, you still owned another human being that you had no right to, okay? You still felt you had that right, God gave right to own somebody else's body. And especially with a female enslaved person, that right to own the person's body also took on a very unpleasant sexual context as well. So the treatment of an enslaved person in Canada would have been the same as one in the United States or in the Caribbean, and it would have depended on who owned them. Also, unlike in the French Americas or Spanish Americas, where you had one codified set of laws for enslaved persons, the Siete Partidos in the Spanish-speaking Americas and the Code Noir in the French-speaking Americas. In the British Americas, each colony was given greater autonomy to pass their own slave laws. So St. Kitts, Antigua, Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, etc., the planter-dominated assemblies would pass their slave laws. You would have had a similar situation in Canada where the local assembly would have passed the slave laws. I remember the assemblies are made up of white male property owners who themselves would have owned enslaved persons. So to put it in the words of a calypsonian we had some years ago in a song, he had a song said, "Who gonna guard the guard?" So you're basically asking enslavers to pass and enforce laws on the treatment of enslaved persons, okay? So put it in that context. So the treatment would not have varied. Now to move into the connections between Canada and the wide Atlantic world. The system of sugar and slavery connected the entire Atlantic world, and many of the connections are not obvious, okay? But within the British Empire, in what is now Canada and in the UK, people from many walks of life benefited from the sugar and the slave trade. Let me give one of the most outstanding examples involving Canada. Shortly after what we call the sugar revolution, when sugar replaced the crops that were being cultivated previously. Now, unlike tobacco or cotton, etc., sugar, to be profitable, has to be grown on a large scale, okay? As a small farmer, you can profitably farm tobacco or cotton, and it's much simpler. You pick the cotton, pack it in a barrel, export it. You pick the tobacco leaves, you dry them, you cure them, you pack them, export them. The sugar cane has to be processed first. You need to crush the sugar cane. Then you need to boil the juice, okay? So that involves expensive equipment, okay? And because it takes a good amount of sugar cane, to get a reasonable amount of sugar crystals, you need to grow it on a larger scale. So what ended up happening is that you find on an island like St. Kitts, Nevis, Barbados, Antigua, most of the fertile land being taken up to grow a cash crop. Now remember, this is not a food crop. You cannot survive off of eating sugar cane, as tasty as it is. So therefore, what ended up happening is that on St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua and Barbados, you had to import much of the food you needed to feed both the white population and the majority black enslaved population. Now, bearing in mind the racial attitudes, the planters are not going to spend a lot of money on imported food for the enslaved population. They're going to look for the cheapest food source possible. Salted codfish was a very cheap source of food. Now, the codfish is not found in Caribbean waters. It's found in North Atlantic waters, okay? And up to today, cod fishery is an important part of the economy still in the Maritimes provinces. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, many men and women make their living in the cod fisheries, okay? And it was salted because there was no refrigeration back then. So you had to preserve it for that long voyage from the North Atlantic down to the Caribbean. So many trawlermen and schooner owners made a living providing this cheap provision for the populations of the Caribbean. And these schooners ran a very interesting and complex trade. It was not simple back and forth. You drop off the codfish in Bastia, Sandy Point, St. John's, Kingston, wherever, and head back to Canada. What would happen, to give an example? So let's just say a schooner arrives from one of the maritime provinces with a cargo of the salted codfish, and they offload their cargo at a particular Caribbean port. They would then take on provisions from that island, and then they would play an inter-island trade, trading from island to island, okay? Not only would they take on cargo, but they would also take on, they would come with a very small crew, a skeleton crew, and they'll take on further sailors on the islands, okay? Now, again, the stereotype we have of slavery is that just plantation work. While undoubtedly, especially on an island like St. Kitts, most of the enslaved worked on the plantation, a large minority also worked in the maritime sphere, including as sailors. Now, it's hard to imagine a sailor being but many enslaved men were sailors, okay? Many of them were experienced boat captains who guided boats coming into the harbor. Many of them were owned by merchants who would hire them out. They would work on a ship. When they get back home, they would share a percentage of their earnings with their master, etc. So they had autonomy and freedom of movement to some extent within the restrictions of a white supremacist slave society, okay? So a schooner would come to an island, offload its cargo of codfish, take on a crew of men from different islands, and they'll trade from island to island, okay? And then head back to Canada. So this was one important connection between Canada and the Caribbean, and this continued even after slavery ended. This maritime connection continued. Let me ask a question for those here from Canada. Have any of you ever heard the name of a ship named the Blue Nose? You've heard of Blue Nose? Okay. For those of you, the rest of you here, Blue Nose is one of the most famous sailing ships ever, right up there with the British Cutty-Sark, okay? Blue Nose was a fishing and racing schooner built in the early 20th century. I think she was built in 1921. She was a fishing schooner, and she had to take part in several races, won several races. She was at that time perhaps one of the fastest sailing ships in the world, okay? Now, most of her trade is in the North Atlantic. In the latter part of her career, her Canadian owners sold her to the West Indies Trading Company, and she operated in the Caribbean until she ran aground on a reef off a small island off Haiti in 1942 and was wrecked, unfortunately. But just to show you the connection, so the most famous sailing ship Canada ever produced, the latter part of her career, she operated in the Caribbean. And although Dean Abraham happened to speak about slavery, I need to point out that even after slavery ended, those connections between Canada and the Caribbean continued. One infamous connection is between the Caribbean and Canada, specifically Jamaica and Nova Scotia. We all heard about the Maroons of Jamaica, okay? There were Maroons on every Caribbean island. those in Jamaica became famous because due to the size of the island, they were able to create semi-permanent communities, okay? In the 1730s, you had the first Maroon War fought between the Maroons and the British forces. And that was ended by a treaty, okay? However, there were several actions of the British that undermined the treaty. And this, plus the influence of the Haitian Revolution, led to the outbreak of the Second Maroon War in 1795. That war ended the following year with another treaty. However, the then British governor of Jamaica began plotting to get rid of what he saw as a menace. And so he conspired to put the Maroons on some ships that happened to be in the harbor in Kingston and exile them. So he sent them to Nova Scotia without actually communicating anything to the governor of Nova Scotia. So you can imagine the governor of Nova Scotia surprised when shiploads of Maroons showed up, okay? But to his credit, the governor of Nova Scotia did his best to try to help them settle in. Obviously, you could imagine the climate would have been a factor for them to adjust. So many of them did not want to stay there, and they lobbied to leave. There were some who were willing to stay, and as would happen in human history, they would have made connections and formed relationships with women in the black community in Nova Scotia. However, within a couple of years, within 2 years, the majority got their wish, and they were really relocated to Freetown in Sierra Leone. So that Caribbean-Canada connection spread to influence West Africa as well, okay? Now, anecdotal evidence indicates that some of them did stay in Jamaica, in Nova Scotia, okay? And they would have undoubtedly today, you're going to have Afro-Nova Scotians whose genealogy would trace back to those Maroons who were exiled to Nova Scotia. So there's a strong historical link, and I would say a strong Afro-historical link between the province of Nova Scotia and the Caribbean. And that link continues to the present day because there are Canadians walking around today. And I'm quite certain if we do a DNA test, people will be surprised. Not just black Nova Scotians, but there are white Nova Scotians walking around today not knowing that they have Maroon blood in them, okay? So that connection continues and persists. And this initiative between our two colleges shows that connection is continuing, albeit in a much more positive manner and on a much more equal basis. Thank you. I hope I kept my promise of being brief. Okay. And kudos to those responsible for organizing this shared initiative between our two countries and our two colleges. And all the best, and welcome to St. Kitts and Nevis.
Dr. Gill. All right, I didn't want class to end, but yeah, I did not, I don't know if my colleagues and even students have shared it. History happened to be one of my favorite subjects in high school, and geography. But every time I sit in a history lesson, I sit comfortably and I just put on that absorb mode. So I just listen and take in and take in. Again, thank you very much. Very detailed, very thorough, very knowledgeable, making the connections. It's like the teacher in me. You're looking for an answer for a student, but for understanding, you're looking for the examples. So you don't want to give an answer, but you want to give an example to ensure that you understand exactly what you are saying. So Dr. Gill, you have a student here who's looking for an A in your class. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I know we've been here for a bit. I'll just move on speedily with the agenda and ask our senior lecturer, Dr. Christine Walwyn, to come in and give us the vote of thanks before we move on to the next item for the day. Thank you, Dr. Gill.
Good morning. All protocols observed. Apologies for Dr. Hanley. He had to leave for Parliament, so we want to thank him in his absence. But happy that he was able to make it. I was a little nervous that he wouldn't be able to make it on a Tuesday morning after Labor Day weekend, but he assured me that he would, so I'm very grateful. Give thanks to the Almighty for us all being here, good health and strength, and great weather for the Canadians. Your Excellency, thank you so much. I know you're the glue between the two institutions, and we thank you for your work that you do for us, not only in the educational level, but throughout. And we are so happy that you happen to be here in St. Kitts at this time and could join us. Thank you. As I sat going through, I said, in her absence, I think we should give some kudos to Dr. Hermie Anthony Morton, who was the person who brought this whole thing together 10 years ago, and who had the vision to pull this off. And I think it's people on her shoulders that we stand today, that we could be proud of this program. So, thanks to everybody who took part today, the entertainers, Mr. Pemberton, former IT student, yes, one of my past students, thank you. Ms. Stevenson, I'm sure we could not acknowledge that she didn't just read the prayer. She was into the prayer, right? So we thank you. And Mr. Inanga, I'm always very proud to say he's my cousin. So we're from the Waldron Nevis roots. And he got all the talent, I didn't get any. Right. To Dr. Rothan and the entire staff of CFPC, we are so happy that you have embraced this program and that we are all here. I'm going to thank, I'm going to leave those to the last, but I'm going to thank the lecturers, especially who are going to be participating in the programs. Dr. Neal, Ms. Gilbert, I was going to call you your other name, Ms. Rogers, who is not here, and Ms. Sunita Daniel, who will be facilitating the program as we go through. Or visitors or guests. I should say welcome home. Welcome home, Zoran, because you've been here often enough. After 3 times, 4 times. Is it like your 5th time? Who's counting? You're no longer a visitor, so I'll put you in a different class. Welcome home to you, Zoran, and welcome to the visitors. We know that we have a packed program, and it gives you enough education, entertainment, relaxation, and you're going to go back with, well, what can I say? I want to thank my students, my current students. 3 of them are here for showing up today. Really, thank you very much. I know. You have so many other things to do, like getting ready for your final assessment that I'm doing there, right? So I'm grateful that you found the time to come. Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I just popped into Dean Abrams' office and I said, what happened? The Canadians didn't like it? They're not coming back? And he says, oh, they are. In 2.5 weeks. So we quickly put a program together. Well, we just kind of pulled up last year's, and I want to thank Dean Abraham because he has all the vision and everything. He says, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm going to leave it in your hands. So I thank him for the confidence and for making things happen, because up to last night we're still checking on each other. And I deliberately left Dr. Gill for last. I'm sure that you agree with me that he deserves a standing ovation. So before. I know most of us say, oh yes, I remember that, I know that, but it's always so great to have a reminder, right? And to get this information, and I think when we get, I don't even want to call it a lecture, but when we get information like this, it gives us a good founding, I guess, put our foot right. And we want to make sure that this happens more often. So, Ms. Daniel, we're going to continue to work with this. Dr. Gill, we really appreciate you doing this lecture. It seems that when I put in the program together, Dean Abraham, I said, okay, and who are we going to ask for this story? He said, oh no, I got that covered. I got that covered. You don't even have to worry about it. Just move on to the next item. He didn't even quite tell me what it was going to be or who it's going to be, but I got it covered. 2 days after, I went back to him. I said, Dean Abraham, we didn't find a feature speaker. He said, I told you I got it covered. It's Dr. Gill. I was like, oh, okay, we're covered. We're good. So thank everyone for coming this morning and for all the other administrators, lecturers. We want to thank my friend at the back here, whose name I can't remember right now, but for putting Mr. Heyman Hobson, yes. And I know it was we thought we were so prepared that we had the room prepared from last Friday, but somebody had a better idea than us to dismantle the room. So this morning, Mr. Hobson had to come running in and trying to put everything together, and we're grateful that it came off. So, thank you, thank you, thank you.
So thank you to the person who gave thank you. Dr. Walwyn, thank you very much. Like I said, sometimes when things happen, and it happened at the sport at the moment, you have some champions that you can call on and say, listen, we could get this done, we could do it, let's do it. So I know you're a let's do it person, and we're going to find a way, and we are here today. Thank you very much. I see Dr. Narain, who's our Director of Employee and Program Development. Thank you for coming, Dr. Narain. We also have Dr. James, my neighbor right there. Family members take a level of beating that other persons don't take, so don't take it personal. Welcome. Dr. Neil in the back, trademark shades, bow tie. Just in case you're around, you're going to see the trademark shades, bow tie, Dr. Neil. All right? Again, thank you very much to all. High Commissioner, thank you again. And we look forward to the further engagement. Dr. Rotam, Mrs. Berridge, I know you're in the corner there quiet, VP of Finance, and everyone. So thank you and the thank you. And we look forward to the activities that starts now. Thank you.